So what I'm trying to do today, the objective is really, I want to show that if we have a character that in this case is on the outside, is the turquoise character. I've just heard a word the other day calling this kind of character solonic, which is a mix of soulful and solonic, which gives us also an idea how advanced this kind of being is. But it couldn't really be if you wouldn't have somebody who understands systems and how everything is connected, how the human species is connected. And that couldn't be possible if you wouldn't have somebody who understands relationships and how important it is to co-create and to bring together professional and personal purpose. And again, as you might expect, that wouldn't be possible if you hadn't somebody who in this confusing world of today would be able to be pragmatic, who have a certain level of goal orientation about where to go in life. And that is not possible for a human being if it's not built on self-discipline, on being able to plan. And in the world that we live, which are very blue in many ways, next time you fill out your text statement, remember me, we need to have that ability. And with that in mind, it's important underneath that to have a certain level of personal drive, to have a level of curiosity, self-belief. And that can only really happen if we have that second stage purple, which builds trust, a sense of belonging, knowing where it comes from. And ultimately, that all goes down to the beige character that is within all of us, which can only really exist if you have that level of sense of security. Okay. And so I believe to a certain degree, these Russian dolls are a very good metaphor for helping us understand how one is related to the other. Now, with that in mind, let me give you a bit of an idea where I'm coming from and what I'm all about and why am I talking about this. So when it comes to values, I really came across this in '91. I was 20. I was always interested in self-development at an early age. And my company wasn't paying for a training program, but I attended one. And so I was introduced to a value test. Quite straightforward, 20 values, you compare them, it gives you a ranking. You look at your top 5 and your bottom 5. And so since then, since '91, every 2 to 3 years, I've done a value test. And so I've seen how my values have changed. And then when I started off my own business, one of my first big projects was with Daimler Chrysler during that merger. And I was contracted to run a program for the 144 vice presidents worldwide to run a value program. And it was very interesting with the head of the university at that time, this discussion we had on him originally having the idea of this simple, well, we print values on posters and then we just basically send them out. And me having a much more contextual approach of saying, no, you need to start off with having cultural regions because they will define values differently. And then what you need to do, a value like one of them was trust in their case, that doesn't mean anything. So we need to provide vice presidents with tools which then help to bring behaviors and practices to life, which develop trust between employees and leaders. And so it got quite complicated, but at the end, it was a very successful global program. So values are very much a part of my work. I've used it also globally. I've worked with up to 54 countries. So I also understand that how values differ in certain countries, and that it's not often that clear cut. My mission nowadays is very much to promote the great value systems, spiral dynamics, integral theory, because I believe that the next generation will run into serious problems when it comes to our habitat. And I believe the Grace value system, the roadmap, can or will then be mission critical for getting us out of this mess. At the same time, after publishing the book and being more part of social networks and groups, I have to say I'm getting a bit bored of the discussions about second tier, what I call altitude sickness, because ultimately, as you've just seen with the dolls, yes, people might want to believe that they're turquoise. Ultimately, to be terribly honest, I'm not even sure if there is somebody who can be 100% turquoise. It's a bit like saying, I'm an Englishman in America, and I'm being understood as an Englishman in America. But if I don't come from a country that is England, because there is not such thing as a turquoise world yet, how can we know in a country like America what a turquoise person or what an Englishman looks like? And with that in mind, with this hierarchical thinking, what I think we are missing out on is the understanding that every stage, every level comes with a healthy and an unhealthy side. And too often, I think we say, oh, he then switched back into the red third stage, and that's put into like a negative context. And I think we need to start to differentiate more what that is all about. And this is what I would like to invite you today to explore with me further. Now, with that in mind, I'll take you through the outline in a minute. If you have any questions in between, please feel free to challenge me. I would like to have this session as lively as possible. And if there are any comments, you're welcome to put them into the chat. And as far as I know, Paul will monitor the chat. And Paul, you're more than welcome to question or challenge me in between if there's something in the chat. Otherwise, I'm very open. I don't know the truth. This is my perspective today, and you're more welcome to add your color to whatever I'm saying. So we are in the welcome and the introduction. We have a Q&A at the end. Again, please interrupt me in between, especially when it comes to going through the characters, because it can get a bit repetitive considering 8 characters. I've allowed 3 to 5 minutes per character, which means it would be great if you could contribute at any point in time. We have a bit of time for that. Otherwise, I will swiftly through the characters in order then to get at the end to the Q&A session. Now, what you will find out today is that when I show you the slides, I will not read them out to you. You read at a speed of about 300 words per minute. I speak at a speed of about 150 minutes per minute. And therefore, it's much faster and more effective if you read than if me reading out to you. Oh, the wrong button. We'll look at values from different angles. There's a bit of an experiment that's going on in the background, and I would like to welcome you today to explore this a bit further with me and also to get your feedback, which obviously is more than welcome at the end when we come to the discussion. So with no further ado, let's jump in. Just a word of caution. This has recently become one of my favorite quotes. Because let's be fair, I mean, the world is so colorful, it's so dynamic, and even the Graves logic, as we know, or the spiral dynamics logic, I mean, it is so complicated to I mean, we know all that. If you try to explain that to somebody who's new to it, it is so overwhelmingly complicated. At least that's how I feel. At the same time, it's such a simplification of what's going on around us. And so somewhere in between, there's a certain level of vagueness, and you will definitely encounter that with me today, because the topic of values can be fairly abstract at times. So just some clarifications before we start. I just mentioned that. We had a big discussion, you know, whether these characters like that symbolize a level, whether they can be archetypes or not. I don't know. These discussions get very philosophical and academic at some point, and I don't know. I'm quite a pragmatic person. For me, it needs to be useful. Again, this is one that is extremely important to me, because ultimately, really, I don't care about how high somebody is in the spiral, because that is really not a reflection of the individual, I believe. It's more a reflection of the life conditions, the system that surrounds the individual, that allows that person to live up to a certain stage. And I think ultimately our goal needs to be that we create the life conditions, especially for younger people, to live up to their potential. And it's not so much that they are dumber or more intelligent than we were, but they can achieve so much more if we use our knowledge to provide the right environments. So I'm trying to approach schools, colleges, universities, and business schools at the moment for them to take on the colorful framework in whatever form or shape. And because through them, I want this insight to be multiplied. Therefore, if you have any interest in this or any connections or anything, please hook up with me. I do that on a pro bono level. So it's really about trying to ignite that thinking in learning institutions, which, to be terribly honest, I find them at the moment to be more institutions than about learning. Now, one thing today important to me is, you know, we can take a value and then we could talk about this for an hour, and it's different viewpoints. It's the understanding of it. And my objective is not to be right. I can give you my side of having worked with value over 20 years. To be honest, take what you like and leave what you don't like. I don't want to convince you. I don't want to be the ultimate authority here, because I am not. I just would like you to be provoked at times. So if you suddenly really dislike something about what I'm saying, then that's great, because that means you're thinking about it. And that's all I'm really looking for today. Because ultimately, values are fairly abstract in the way they are. And as we all know, everything is relative, what we're speaking about today. So let's jump straight in. The topic at hand. What personality is to an individual, culture is to a group. As we know, with the upper left and the lower left quadrants, it's values on either for individuals or shared by a group. And we'll have a few examples in a minute. The one I came across earlier on in the mid-90s when I was working for a global automotive company and we were rolling out a global program, was at that point, it was all about stepping up and we were more about quality. And then I spent time in about 20 countries, and it got all a bit confusing at times. And then I started to understand that there was a pattern. And the pattern was actually that quality is being understood very differently in different parts of the world. And here's an example that highlights this. So imagine Starbucks saying we need to differentiate ourselves now, we need to move up market, we need to be more about quality, and then sending out a statement to all their subsidiaries to provide more quality when it comes to their cups. Now, the implications would be that the Italians would come with a very different solution than the North Americans, for example. And that's reflected in this overview here. So again, please, when I mention something like, I don't know, humor or honesty, then please understand that, you know, we will most likely view this slightly differently. And it's really more about being thought provocative than anything else. Another point that is important to understand is that we all value quality. So all of us believe that quality is important. The question is, let's say in a list of 100 values, where does Jim have quality and where do I have quality? And is there one that he has on a higher level than I have? So is there kind of a mix-up? And that's what I think we always need to be clear about, is that all of us share the same values. It's just how we prioritize them. That's what makes us partly who we are. And I would love to at some point do a project with like 100 values and then create sequences. And if you have a large number of people, imagine 2 people with the same sequence of values from top to bottom. And then to put these people together and see, do they actually do they get along extremely well or not? But that's maybe a project to come in the years to come. Now, let's get a bit more pragmatic with regard to values. Here's a random list. There's no logic in here except that I copied and pasted it from different parts. It is really just meant as food for thought. At the same time, an abstract noun is for today how I define a value. And then we get those mix-ups where you have integrity, which for me is not a value, it's a concept, okay? Then you could say food. Is food a value? Maybe. Well, it's definitely very important in Italy and in Japan. So there are some values that are more conceptual, which might then actually be concepts, and others which work in some cultures and don't work in other cultures. So I don't want to start nitpicking today. But at the same time, I don't want this to be theoretical today. So what I would like to do with you, I would like you to introduce you to a model that we used a lot in the cross-cultural world, which is called the onion model. Okay. And what it is about, it's about values are on the inside. They're surrounded by beliefs. But values and beliefs you cannot see. What you can see is the manifestation of it. And those are the behaviors. Or now we are on with regard to the 4 quadrants, we are on the right side. And it is the behaviors that I would be interested in exploring with you now to clarify that when we are talking about abstract values here, that these are more real than we often might think. So here's an example. At the top, let's pick punctuality. Because of time, we don't necessarily need to go into the belief. Why is that value important to me? What I'm looking for with you is a value that you value personally, or that you find important, or that you have in your company. And then how does that translate into behaviors? And at that point, to be quite specific, preferably even measurable. All right. For this, we'll have a little breakout session where we'll put you together in threes. You're welcome to use a pen and a paper, your phone. If you use the chat box in the Zoom session here, then before you come back into the main room, you need to copy what you have, I think, in order to ensure that it doesn't get lost. So the objective here is to say a value. And does anybody want to throw a value at me and I do the exercise? Who can think of one?
Is autonomy a value? Freedom to think.
Autonomy is a value, yes. Yeah.
That's one that comes to mind.
Yeah. So autonomy, is, for example, is important to me. So why is autonomy important to me? Because I believe life is a personal journey. And in order to understand who I am and what I am, I need to have a certain level of safeguarding from the outside world, a certain level of autonomy to find my own way. Now, that is defined in that I'm not employed by a company anymore, and I haven't been so for 20 years. I've been working on my own. I nowadays have a portfolio career, and that portfolio career has now led me to a point where I have absolute autonomy to who I work with, who I don't work with, when I work and when I don't work. So autonomy, having a portfolio career, when I work, with whom I work, what I work, that is what I'm looking for from you. So come on, who wants to give us an example to test the waters?
I was in group 6. Why don't I start out? And with me was Adrian and Bonnie. And Adrian stated that his values, he had 2 values with clarity and harmony. And
give us one. Give us the better example.
He kind of articulated on clarity. And what he articulated was that his behaviors, that when he would begin to feel a little bit unsettled about things when they became unclear, when he didn't have this sense of clarity.
Actually, can I jump in?
Well, it is about you, isn't it?
Yes, and so if that's okay, Paul, with you, can I share?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So what I shared, I'm going to lead with a harmony, actually, and because it's actually raising some kind of unclarity about this topic, let's say. So the thing I said is the way I value harmony might not be like what you were asking us, because it doesn't feel like something I chose. And it's the same with clarity. It's more like when I don't get that, I get triggered. And I actually started to develop and to see the value into the opposite. For example, and I don't have a name for it, but the opposite of, not the opposite of harmony, but because I can see that I'm driven by this and it's more like a part of me that is reacting to it, I can bring too much allowance to bad behaviors. And I can see that that is bringing harm to me or other people. So I develop kind of an opposite value, which would be, as I said, calling bullshit out, for example. But I'm not sure that harmony here would be, or clarity, as a matter of fact, would be seen as value if I don't get to choose them. It's not that I see the value, it's just that if I don't have that, there is a psychological reaction.
Okay, very French. We're going in very deep. Let's just to help us understand what we're talking about. So if we talk about, somebody says harmony is important to me. So how do we think, could we see that in a person if harmony is important to them? What would they do? How would they behave?
So about me, I always try to see other people's point of view.
Okay, that could also be curiosity.
Yeah, but it is driven by, a lot of the time it's driven by my seeking of harmony.
Yeah, So now we would obviously go down the route of belief, but again, I want to keep this short and simple today. So I want to focus on values and the specific behaviors.
Harmony was also my value. I don't know if I should jump in.
Please.
Just because actually Bet helped me to pick out that word, because I had singled out the belief and the behavior, and I couldn't tell what word was underneath it. And at first I thought it was love, and then she suggested harmony, and I thought that was a good word. But the belief for me is that nature must be respected. Of course, harmony can express itself in many different ways, but my belief in this particular example was that nature must be respected. We must live in harmony with nature, we humans. And then my particular behavior is to create a small ecosystem in my backyard with chickens and fruit trees and a place that's welcoming for insects, and just try to create a small habitat in our backyard. So that's the external expression. But at first I couldn't tell what the value was, and we were actually debating in our group what is a value. But I just want to jump in just to say that I also possibly have that same value.
Just to give you specific feedback on that now, I would say, okay, the value that comes to mind here is more nature than it is actually harmony. I mean, I understand this idea of global harmony and living in harmony with nature, but it sounds more like to me, if you say in the back garden, I have created something like a microcosm, so to speak, with all different kinds of animals, then nature is the value that comes to mind here.
But how is nature a value? I don't understand that word as the value word.
But that's the whole point. It's the question of saying to somebody, if somebody says, well, I value nature, then okay, how can I see that? What do you do that makes you show, that helps you to prove
a behavior
that nature is really important to you? And if I then have somebody sitting in front of me with a bag of McDonald's and a Coke, then I might think, okay, that person and me, we have a different understanding of what's important, or how we define nature.
Maybe my misunderstanding is that I thought that a value was a personality adjective or something like that. And maybe it's not.
No, it's something like humor, nature, family, career, adventurism.
Okay.
All those are values.
Okay, so it can be anything, really. Anything that you value. I value blank, and then that blank is the value.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you
okay, you want me to finish?
So for example,
Sorry, Paul. Just
That's okay. No, that's fine.
Completely.
Robert?
No, that's perfectly okay. It was good to get a little clarity around the issue of harmony there.
Robert?
so I was wondering, if I say I value ponies, is this also a value? Or I value apples?
Well,
No,
but
that would be more a preference of taste. If you say health is important to me, and I eat an organic apple every day, then there's kind of a link for me between health and the specific behavior that occurs daily, including apples. But I value apples as a bit, no, I would say, just for the sake of keeping this short and sweet. I hope I didn't offend you, Robert.
No, you didn't offend me. No, I was just wondering, because you said I value nature, and therefore it's kind of, for me, it could be also an object that you value, and not like an attitude you have for the world. So that's how I think it's more about the interpretation of the word value.
And value is something abstract that you cannot see, at least in my book of definitions. And a manifestation, a behavior, that's something that you can see, that you can observe. But these are on the outside, and they can be observed and measured and improved. But that is not an object. The value is something abstract. Who else has a specific example to share?
So maybe, go ahead, Paul.
Well, I was going to say, I'm going to real quickly go through what Bonnie said and I said, and anybody can jump in. Bonnie very quickly said that her values were interpersonal action and patience, and that how that manifested was that she really tried to exercise patience while letting other people express themselves. And real quickly here, I listed independence as one of my values, and as example, or behavior was that through most of my career, I followed a track of seeking leadership positions within organizations that would allow me to be as independent as possible. So I'm done here.
Okay, good. One more specific example, and then we can move on.
Maybe accountability.
A very interesting one. So I'll be interested now in hearing how you don't just BS us, but are true to your word.
Yeah, so for me, accountability was something. I have some arrested development there as a teen and young adult. And so at some point I began to really feel that that was something I needed to work on myself, which is just, if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And if something's coming up, I communicate, hey, I won't be able to do this. I expect others to do the same. If we agree on something, that we're going to do something or meet or, do something for each other, then we hold each other accountable for what we say we're going to do. And we communicate if things aren't going to work out. So that the behavior would be holding myself, communication and holding myself and the other person accountable.
Okay, Ted, I'm going to be devil's advocate now. Okay, I understand that you understand the meaning of accountability, but Robert also says that accountability is important to him. So how can I see that you actually live that value? When is the last example that you clearly demonstrated that you are accountable?
Well, I think even with this group, right, I have certain administrative tasks, right? So I'm being held accountable to send out the emails and to communicate with the speakers and to make sure that they're going to show up and that they are going to do what they say they're going to do. We had some communication today clarifying what you were prepared to do. That kind of stuff. Those might be some examples, maybe.
Yeah, we're kind of we're getting there. So as you can see, I mean, we all understand values and how important values are, but at the same time, I think we've also all experienced how difficult it suddenly gets when we're being put on the spot and being asked of demonstrating a level of authenticity that proves to a certain degree that we walk the talk. And I think that's something which I learned in '91 when I did this value test. It really shocked me a little bit. And since then, values have become such an intrinsic part of my life that everything I do, I can always immediately link it to a value. I mean, that's obviously now 20 years of practice or 30 years of practice, which means I'm quite clear about my value structure, which means when I run into a dilemma, and a dilemma is typically when you have a clash between two values, family and career, and it's a Friday afternoon, 5 p.m., and your boss says, we would really like to finish that project plan. Do you now put your career first and stay, or do you put your family first and leave? Okay, so you end up in a dilemma. And the more clear we are about our values and how that relates to behavior, the more authentic we can be to ourselves. And ultimately, the easier it is to uncover other people's bullshitting. And pardon my French, but and it's twofold. It's one, some people just talk. And I mean, I'm sorry, car salesmen come to mind. They would sell you whatever, and then you ask them, are you actually honest with? Of course, honesty is very important to me. All right. Mm-hmm. You're telling me that car has never had a damage. And the other thing is, obviously, when you act internationally, is that respect is being understood differently in different countries. So if we have got, for example, somebody saying that patience is important, okay, then Italian might say, yeah, patience is important to me as well. But when you have a discussion with an Italian, they often wouldn't let you finish your sentence. They would jump right in, which for an American or a Brit would be somebody being impatient. So it's a different question of perspective depending on the cultural context. And so all I'm trying to do here with you is I'm trying to bring to your awareness that there's a lot more that we can do around values, why they are important, and how we can ensure that people walk the talk. Okay, because ultimately, again, we all have those values in us. But if somebody, for example, values harmony, then I value harmony too. But I value progress more than harmony. So I will start a discussion and I will create creative conflict, which is disharmony, in order to make progress. Okay, so you can get a feeling how well I get along with a lot of my fellow Brits. For them, harmony is quite important, and it's more important to keep the harmony than it is to make progress. Okay, just think of harmony and honesty. All right, that's an interesting kind of one that you can discuss at some point with your partner or with a friend to explore this a bit further. So I hope that session that has now helped us to understand that once we talk about these abstract values now, they are abstract, but at the same time, they're absolutely meaningful, because that the behavior is much more important than what somebody says is important to them, because it's the behavior that will help you to understand how real that value really is to them. How high do they actually put it? And how do they understand it in the first place? Okay. So that's just something for you to take away. Now, in the book that I wrote, the Turquoise Brick Road, you have 15 characters, and that's 8 plus 7. And I will now explore different values with you by going through the different characters. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help us understand how coming to Hortense means building values layer by layer. And that you can't really be one without the other. Okay. Now, in the book, for example, what I do is every chapter looks at specific elements of each character, of each level. And as you can see, values is one that is in each chapter. So let's jump straight in. I asked the ones who have read the Turquoise Brick Road to please jump in between. I want to keep this a bit lively, and just me talking all the time is hopefully not what we will have at the end, because I want this to be a bit more colorful. So very shortly, the character in the first chapter, the first representing the base stage, is Amon. As Veronica already pointed out in another session, mentally he is a bit more advanced than Beige, but he lives a very beige life. So he's basically a refugee who ended up in a part of the world that is called Purpleshire, and he's basically surviving. And so what's really important to him is the fundamental aspects of living, which in this case are these three, which are very similar to Maslow's bottom layer of the hierarchy of needs. And as we know, Maslow and Grace work together, so there's no real surprise there. So he gets by every day. Now in Purpleshire lives also a lady, lovely, she's called Bo. Bo lives there with her family. She runs the local shop, and Bo was born and bred in Purpleshire. Family and community is very important to her. She's deeply in love with her husband. She's a devoted wife. She runs the local shop, which she inherited from her father, who inherited it from his father. And she's also a big believer in Confucianism and believes in the good in people. And so with that in mind, what she brings to life are values which are essential to us: trust, being close to people, being able to be close to people, and feeling like belonging somewhere. So, and somebody who has left Purpleshire because it was just, everything was too close. Everybody knows everything about each other. It's traditions and nothing really changes. And Conan is the kind of guy who just wanted to break free. I always see that Freddie Mercury black silhouette visual. I want to break free. I want to find my own way. So Conan set off a few years back, moved to the city. Obviously, that's where things are happening. He started working in a bank. Again, it was all kind of very systemized, very structured, obviously representing the blue world. He stepped out and is now challenging the status quo of the financial world by having set up a startup company, working with a few other guys together, and he's trying to turn the sector of retail banking on its head. He lives in Glamden, small apartment, but it's in a good location. So every time he tells people about where he lives, he has that fancy address. He loves the nightlife. He loves Thai boxing. Every day to be different. Life is a challenge at times. He loves extreme sports, and that's Conan. And I love Conan in many ways, because what he brings to life is what is important to all of us. Because like what Paul said about independence, the healthy ego, the self is at the core of that independence. If I want to be independent of the world around me, what do I depend on? I depend on me. So that's very important to understand, is that interplay between self and the world around us. I mean, it's obviously we're going down the route of the double helix, self and the life conditions. And as we can see, I mean, these are fundamental to life. We also know that we all go through these development stages in our early life. Beige is 0 to 18 months, purple is 18 months to about 3 years, and at 3 years we develop the self. And that's why it's so important to safeguard children at this point, because if any harm comes to them, this basis that is needed to build a healthy life has somehow been damaged. If a child has experienced distrust at an age of 2 years, or not being cared for. I mean, we even know that from physical closeness can be measured in the health of a child's brain, depending on how much time it spends with the mother. So these are really the fundamental building blocks of human nature and health. Now, Conan is obviously an extreme person. He loves sports, and he just had a Thai boxing accident. And when that happened, he had to go for a treatment. And lucky enough, Doc, who also originally comes from Purpleshire, heard about Conan having had this accident. And she's just running a research group. She works for a body that is the mix of a pharmaceutical corporate and a university. And they're doing research into understanding when does eustress, so healthy stress, turn into negative stress, into damage, which creates damage in the tissue and does physical harm. And she invites Conan into this project. But besides that, she is very organized, very structured. The project that she's working on is merely about gathering data. So they're building a huge database at that research campus. And she's dutiful. She is a person that has a level of sense of duty. She dedicates a lot of work to the local community. She has 2 children, and she lives a very organized and structured life. And she's a happy person. So she brings to us values which are also very important. And they're very important if you want to continue to develop. And this is where Eli enters the stage. And Eli is your cool partner in a firm. He loves his Tesla Roadster because it is the state-of-the-art tech on 4 wheels. He's a cool dude. He not just has a dog, he has a Samoyed, which is one of the most prestigious dogs you can get. He loves sports. He used to be an athlete, but at some point he overdid it. And so he had to step back from performance sports, and he entered the financial world and ended up as a partner at Perform Invest. And he has a very entrepreneurial mindset. And so what he does with a doc together, he buys the research data from doc and turns this into algorithms, into an app that helps athletes understand when to stop pushing themselves, because if they continue, they would harm themselves. And so how can you push yourself to the max, building strength and not harming yourself? And that's obviously close to his heart, because that's why he had to back out of being a professional athlete, because at some point he overdid it. And you know, he's a cool dude. He brings a lot to the table. He is empathetic, and empathy is the understanding of being able to put yourself into others people's shoes, and that's more of an intellectual ability, I think, to a certain degree. And he has perfectioned that. He's really the kind of guy who can anticipate other people's moves, which is obviously great in a company where you work with different partners. It's very competitive. It's a lot about money and bonuses. You're trying to win big deals. And so being able to negotiate and figuring other people out is one of his core skills. But he's also very pragmatic. He focuses on what's important, and goal orientation is his ultimate key. Now, he obviously is trying to create a software app that runs on a mobile. And this is where Florence enters the picture. Florence used to work with Eli. She got a bit fed up with this pushing and targets before people. She used to be a Scrum coach. Then she went more down the route of being an agile coach. So moving away from the kind of the orange process objective driven agile thinking, to a more open, green, flexible, relationship-oriented, agile working. And so she works with her company on developing state-of-the-art solutions for the consumer market. And so Eli is one of her customers. Eli likes her because he knows that she delivers. So she has that sense of duty in her. She does know how to perform. She is pragmatic to focus on the priorities. And with her team together, she can bring all that creativity into that app that Eli desires so much. Now she lives in a very different world to Eli. It takes her about 4.5 hours by high-speed train to get to her place because she lives in a holon, which is a community-based environment, which was developed as a response to natural forces, so fires, floods, and pandemics. And so in this world, what they have created is holonic structures, which means there is a holon, which is Florence's community. And that holon is then part of a sequence of a number of holons, usually 6 to 9, who then again create one holarchy, one holonic structure. So it's like cells in a bigger cell, which is then part of, again, a bigger cell. And depending on the natural forces, you're able to retreat to a level where you can protect yourself, or if there's an outbreak, you can contain whatever it is within that holonic structure. So I started writing this chapter in March 2020, last year. It was on the day of the lockdown, so it was the beginning of a spiritual journey at this point in time. But let me not bore you with Florence any longer. She is, though, nevertheless, a lovely character. If you're interested in her life, on the website, the Turquoise Brick Road, under More, there is a sample chapter, and Florence's chapter is the sample chapter. So if you're just interested in sociology, holacracy, Scrum, agile management, and this kind of living and working, then please feel free to read her chapter. So, and I know, for example, we'll come to that in a minute. These words are getting a bit. So Barbara, I'm sure now when she reads DNY, diversity and inclusion, she is gonna be able to discuss this with me. I'm not perfectly happy with this at this point in time with DNY, but I couldn't think of anything other. So I'm not sure. Barbara, any thoughts on that? Is there a better word than diversity and inclusion at the green stage? Without wanting to put you on the spot?
No. And maybe it's diversity and inclusion goes down the dark side of green these days so damn fast it makes your head spin, right? But the concept is certainly in green. It's and it's a word that green really grokks, right?
Yeah, no, I'm fully with you. I think you're absolutely right. I think that's the right way of putting it. I mean, there's a lot of abuse when it comes to DNY, but it's true. It's a spiritual home is the 6 green stage.
And and I'm going to come into this from an age thing since I've probably got more than 20 years on you, and that is the original diversity and inclusion people, the folks that were running around the organization saying, wait a minute, the value that you could get from all these people that you've decided are marginalized, and being a woman, I could include myself in that from time to time. You're just missing the boat, and that was a green concept, but a lot of it was executed in an orange manner originally, which was hey guys, you're losing the bottom line, and let me, and then Green would come in and do their more positive version of what diversity and inclusion gave to a corporation, right? And it wasn't that negative thing that happens now where you know, you have to change pronouns in order to belong, right?
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you. Thanks for sharing that, Barbara. So let me introduce the last two characters that we have. Obviously, jumping into the second tier, we've got we've got G, aka Jerry, Gerald. Some of his heroes, and all my characters have heroes in their stories that they look up to. Claire W. Graves is, for example, one of his, because he started to openly pull together a lot of knowledge. Bartolomeo, or whatever his name is, the guy, the gentleman who invented the systems thinking, or coined it, or was one of the first ones to coin. These are his heroes. Also Timble, the gentleman who developed the World Wide Web, because G is very much about pulling everything together. And as much as I love the character, I also find him a bit confusing. He lives in Platonopolis, which is a world that we don't really know yet. It has obviously built on the Hellenic structures of Florence, in the way that they have also started to restructure existing streets and communities in cities to replicate these communities at different levels. He has different jobs. He's very kind of, obviously universal basic income is something that already at Florence's world came to life. So he doesn't really have to earn a living anymore. Citizenship is very important in Platonopolis. So he has been educated at an early stage to understand who he is, to find out how to contribute to society. And by doing that, society provides him with a life that is about knowledge and figuring out what life's all about, whilst also taking on a lot of the duties, things that need to be done in Platonopolis. Now, that's just three of the values that are kind of picked out of a whole list that are important to G. G is obviously also working together with Florence on the app, but at the same time, he's very much working with a character at the moment, which is called Hortense. Hortense is a kind of a lovely character, somebody we don't really know a lot about because she's a bit mystical. So she works a lot with energies. She's a clairvoyant. She has lots of jobs, also works in the local community where she lives in the outside of the city, in the countryside. They have started to bring communities to life on planet Earth, depending on where you have energies. So whether it's the sun or thermal energies, people have started to settle in places which provide a natural advantage, which makes it much more easy to live in harmony with nature. Is also replicated in the currency. So we don't have money at this stage anymore, but it's a fluid digital currency that helps to facilitate the understanding of how much do I contribute and how much do I take from nature. And that profit loss always needs to work in the way in favor of the planet. So what Hortense and her people at the 8th stage actually manage is to bring nature, Mother Earth, and the universe more to life than what they're taking from Mother Earth. So looking around us, she's a very different character to the ones we know. And again, to be terribly honest, I don't somehow know if any hortenses really exist in the world, because ultimately, as long as we're stuck in a first tier world, how do we know what a fully mature second tier turquoise character really looks like? And that brings me to the end of the list. Again, it's funny, as high as you get, the more difficult it gets for me to find the right terminology, which is also good evidence for that we're actually just not that far yet. Because obviously words and terminology are manifestations of cultural advancements. And so, yes, we obviously have a word for computer in the blue world, but a lot of the worlds are missing at the turquoise level because we don't have any countries yet that operate at that level. Now, to a certain degree, this is really what I wanted to do with you. I wanted to show you that, you know, we need that sense of security, okay? And only if we really have that, as we know from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, also with the second level, we can have a sense of belonging, to trust others, to be part of a tribe, of a family. And once we feel that safety, then we can really start to explore ourselves. You know, what are we about? Why were we put on this planet Earth? And I think this is where we nowadays also understand, as humans, we have lost our faith. We believed at some point that faith equals religion. And in recent years and decades, obviously many more people have turned away from religion. And as that, they thought, or they did also move away from the belief. And to a certain degree, that's what we need to get back to. We need to understand more, including religions, possibly. But you know, what do we believe in? What's important to a living being, to a human being? And when we rediscover that, then we can really healthily start to understand who we are and what we're about. And when we do that, we can then start to add complexity to our life, because we can manage a more complicated lifestyle. And that level of self-discipline and dedication, that if we understand what's really important to us, and we define goals, and we break these goals down, and we are pragmatic to what keeps us on track, we can actually start to really live out to our potential at this stage. And once we know as individuals who we are and what's important to us, and we start to operate with other people who are as clear as us what is important, and we share that because of a level of transparency and understanding, then we can become a part of a dynamic, agile, fluid group that shares responsibilities and understanding. Barbara, at this point, or shall I finish?
Just a quick question. You also had, I think, shadow characters in your original, so you're not going to go into that today, right?
I will quickly.
Ah, great.
Unless Ted is going to shut me up because I'm not staying within the blue time frame. So
we want shadow.
I'll come, Barbara. I will come to that. And only when we are that can we really be let loose in a society where it is, again, a lot about individuals, but those individuals understand that they're part of a global group of people. And as you know, once that has been achieved, then at some point, maybe our grandkids might be able to really start living in societies that live and let people develop up to a potential that we are capable of. And God knows what comes beyond that. So that, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, so we are about a half an hour away from formally ending the meeting. How long would it take you to cover the shadows? Because
I've just got a few minutes. I can do this fairly, because it's really it's just about the concept. It's not so much about the values themselves.
Okay. And then I think we should move into taking some questions.
Yeah.
Good.
So, as we know, there is a bright side and a dark side, and it will be interesting to explore with you, you know, what do we call it? Constructive, healthy values, destructive, unhealthy. I'm open-minded here. I'm still looking for the right words and the right terminology. What a little project that I've been doing over the last about 8 years is that I've started to, within companies and communities when we work, started to identify values which are what I call universal growth values, positive growth values. And these are not necessarily related to the list that we just saw with all the characters, but they are essential to ensuring that you can actually grow from one stage to the other. And the more you focus on them, the more likely you are to progress. And so these are the ones that I kind of came up with so far. Most of them are listed in the book. Humor is, for example, one. I did relocation trainings for about 12, 15 years. And obviously you have culture shock. And then you need to understand, does your client really have a culture shock, or is he just more frustrated? And for example, what I always looked for is to identify if that person had lost his or her sense of humor. Because once that goes, then you know it's getting critical. But again, that with some nations, that's different than with others, but just as an example. This is obviously one that Andy would buy into, because continuous learning was one of his values. And I think that might be one of the ones that we share. Otherwise, we wouldn't be spending a Saturday morning or afternoon together. Linked to growth mindset. And I think it was it TAD, accountability? Sorry, I can't recall, but.
Yep.
Yep. Also, I think accountability is that kind of, that it has to do with self-awareness, okay? And again, friendship, for example, I said is one of my core values. I mean, I have 4 very close friends. We're like brothers because we went to boarding school together. So we're very close. And we don't share we share everything basically. And you know, it's these friends that know me now for 40 years who are very good at holding up a mirror. And they're also the only ones really who are able to really hold me accountable in many ways. Well, Rhys, that's usually what you say, but this is not what you do. And so it's a very healthy way of holding yourself accountable. But I think, to be honest, life would be much easier without my 4 friends, because I could just say whatever I want. I'm honest and cool and healthy, and I could just do what I want. But these guys don't let me get away. Now, as you've just pointed out, Barbara, we obviously have these shadow characters, which I kind of briefly touch upon in the book, but it's important to always understand the dark side. And the unhealthy, destructive values that we have, that I could think of and that I've listed over the years, are the ones coming up, which I assume are not really that of a surprise for you. They could actually be related to stages to a certain degree, some of them more than others. And again, guys, it's not so much about did I pick the right word here or not. I think it's more for you to take on the idea of, you know, we have values inside of us that kind of we have to have in order to grow healthily, to mature as human beings, as individuals. And if we buy into values that are universally good, and we create environments, whether it is in our workplace, with our family, where we allow self-awareness to develop, and curiosity and tolerance and humor, then we're on the road to ensuring that we and our kids and the people around us together evolve healthily. And at the same time, we need to look at the destructive values that can derail us. And I think we all know that, for me, the red level is one of the most crucial ones, because that's where the ego lives, and the ego is easily tempted, as we have seen by many great leaders who suddenly ended up with ultimate power, and how it got to their heads. It's just sometimes it's too tempting, and that's when somebody hasn't really matured properly, for me. So that's it. Random questions, they're just really here to now open up the room and for us to have a chat before I close the session. And I'm interested in hearing from you.